Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to be taking you through how I'd restructure a 10K per month coaching business to reach 50 to 100K per month. So without further ado, let's get straight right into it. And in terms of actually knowing the main bottlenecks of any specific coaching business, you have to be able to know your data. So these are the main components that I would look at initially, right? First of all, I'll look at the niche, right? So are you actually targeting your ICPs? Right? And your dream followers as well. So first of all, you have to look at your market research. You have to make sure that your market research is on point. How you can ultimately do this is by, utilizing Instagram, YouTube, a lot of type forms, application forms, just to make sure that you're actually targeting the right people. Okay, so figuring out what your audience ultimately wants to buy off the data. Okay, and you have to be analyzing data. You have to be getting feedback from your audience in terms of what they're ultimately after. You can do story sequences, you can do forms, but you really have to collate as much data as you can to really know if you are ultimately targeting the right niche or not. Okay, and off the back of the niche, once you know who to target, then you can craft out your offer. Okay, this is where you're essentially building out your offer statement, and it has to be as irresistible as possible, guys. Your offer has to make it seem like it's a no-brainer. Every time they enter your VSL or they see the offer, it has to resonate with the audience. If not, then it's going to be a lot harder for them to kind of stay in and watch your information that you have in your VSL page as well. So initially, I would look at your offer as well, building out your offer statement, right? On most cases, it's always I help X do Y without X in X days. So what does that ultimately mean? So this means I help specific outcome in a specific time period without biggest pain or fear. Okay, so you have to be able to change the identity shifts of the individuals that are going to be reading your offer, and it has to be irresistible, like I mentioned, right? It has to be a no-brainer, and it targets their specific pain points in the title as well. So once you have a dialed in offer in place, then you look at your funnel. Okay, so you have to see, do you have landing pages? Do you have a VSL? Do you have an opt-in? Are you running free webinars? Right, because all of this is to ultimately make sure that you are capturing as much details as you can. So once they enter your ecosystem, your job is to collect data. That's it. Your job is to collect as much phone numbers, as much emails as you can. So when you do have a sales team, or if you don't have a sales team, then I highly recommend having one, because you obviously want to outsource. But once you can collect as much data as you can, that way, off the back of that, you will be able to kind of make decisions as per the data that you do have, because it's no point plucking ideas out of thin air, right? You can only make very good decisions off the data that you do have. I would also look at sales assets, VSLs. Are you running free trainings? Have you got YouTube? Where are the leads getting funneled to? IG to highlights, highlights to YouTube, YouTube to landing page, right? I would also look at all of that as well, because in this day and age, guys, the best way to ultimately have a lead that converts very well is not from short form, it's ultimately from long form content where they get funneled into YouTube, right? That way they will ultimately trust you more. And I'll touch up on this in a bit as well. And also, guys, you have to make sure that your profile is as optimized as possible. Okay, because profile, it has to be as optimized. There has to be clients results in there. It has to actually show who you are, like your face. It's no point of having a profile where they can't really see your face, right? It's basically just to much credibility as you can and break as much limiting beliefs as you can from your highlights, and just break a lot of objections, right, before they even enter a call with your closer, if you do have one. Okay, so you have to make sure that your IG profile and other socials are as optimized as possible. Okay, so as you can see here, the VSL, right, it is very important to have a VSL. Okay, because this way you'll be able to increase a lot of things, including qualification rate, just so you're ultimately dealing with leads that are ultimately qualified, not broke, right? As an example, the show up rate and the close rate by 20%. So having a VSL, this automatically does all of this for you, because in the VSL, right, in the landing page, you'll have a video, you'll have all your client testimonials, all the proofs, a lot of the pain points that the prospects or your audience are currently facing, and all of it is answered for them before they even jump on a sales call. So it's very important to have a very solid VSL in place. Okay, and of course, before they even enter a VSL page, you have to make sure that there are certain funnels in place that will ultimately get them to the VSL. So the end destination, it has to be the VSL. So after the funnel, then you move on to the TNA. Okay, so the traffic and acquisition. So coming up with content ideas, looking at competitors and being able to be on top of trends. Okay, so what's your competitors doing right now? You don't have to specifically copy them, but you can always take ideas from them and make it into your own. Okay, you have to make sure that you're posting top of funnel content, middle of funnel content as well. Okay, so that's very important. You have to be creating inbound leads or basically just having conversation with leads, and that's where your appointment setter is ultimately going to be doing it. If you do not have an appointment setter, I highly recommend you having an appointment setter, a DM setter, because that just alleviates so much of your time. You know, you don't want to be in the DMs all the time qualifying because you've got other important tasks to do. That's why you should have a DM setter that handles that for you. And you have to make sure that your DM setter is as dialed in as possible. Not only they're willing to do inbound, they're also willing to do outbound as well. Okay, they have to be hungry. 100% have to be hungry. What I always say is closers, right? They need more skill set. They need time in the game. They need skin in the game. However, appointment setters, it doesn't really matter if they're beginners because you know they can always be taught how to appointment set. It's more so just volume and hunger for appointment setters. Okay, how much book calls are you getting right on a daily, weekly, monthly basis as well? And you have to make sure that the leads are getting booked onto sales calls, but only qualified leads. Okay, and main importantly, are you tracking? Right? Are you tracking your numbers, the conversations, the daily basis? If it's not you, if it's the appointment setter, they have to be filling out the end of forms, the beginning of day, just so they're feeding off that feedback. They're giving you that data at the end of the day, just so you know, okay, what's happening right now? Why did I only get why did I only get 5 conversations? Why did I only get 10? So all the time you are analyzing your data. Okay, and this is very paramount to actually get into that 50 to 100k per month. If you're freestyling it, then you will not get to 50 to 100k per month. You have to have a certain system, you have to have dialed in sales team, sales processes, and your content has to be on point. So after the traffic and acquisition, then we move on to the back end. Okay, so do you even have a backend in place, right? Are you using CRM systems in place? I highly recommend go high level, right? There's Airtable as well, but go high level. You know, this way you'll be able to see what's happening. You're like at the top, and you can see, you know, what's going on, where the leads are going, and ultimately what's happening. You can see like a bird's eye view. Okay, so if you have like pipelines, calendars, reminders in place, it has to be built out, guys. If this is not built out, then it is going to make your life a lot harder to actually get to that 50 to 100k per month. Okay, so you have to make sure SMS reminders on book calls as well, right, to heavily increase your show up rate. Okay, do you have a Slack channel, right? Do you have a Discord for all members that are going to be coming in? Is there automated emails in place? Like I mentioned earlier, are your sales teams filling out end of day forms, right, for closes as well? And basically all of this gets fed onto you, right, from the back end system. Okay, so off the back of all the end of day forms, all of your data, you can then make a confined decision, like maybe like let's say at the end of the week, right? And then going on to the next week, you can really make, you know, more better decisions in terms of how to really scale, where your main bottlenecks are. You'll be able to know that from your back end, okay? Because that's where it holds all your data. And then moving on to the sales, very simple, right? You have to make sure that your sales teams are dialed in. If you do not have an appointment setter, I highly recommend having an appointment setter because they will ultimately do the legwork for you. And if you place them on commission based only, then you know the more money that they make, the more money you make as the offer owner, and they make with their commissions as well. And you cannot be greedy, guys, with appointment setters. I've seen people giving 2% to appointment setters, like DM setter, like 3%. I would just give like a 5% because you want to make sure that they're in it and they also get rewarded very well as well. And it's no point being a little bit cocky, right, in terms of just missing out on the 3%. I would reward them really well, because if you reward them well, if you have a good team culture in place, then they are more likely to work harder for you as well. Okay, so having a sales team that is very dialed in and they get rewarded well and a good culture in place, then it ultimately helps you to scale to that 50 to 100k per month. Okay, and they need to be educated in terms of what to do, right, in terms of pre-call notes, right, how to qualify individuals if they're a DM setter, okay, how to ask questions, open-ended questions, all of that. So before they actually book a call, They need to make sure that the prospect is qualified, they're financially qualified, their decision maker is going to be on the call, they're actually serious and they're willing to make a decision. Then the DM setter will ultimately book a call alongside sending them a post video call asset, right? And then they will ultimately create like a group chat between three-way, right? From themselves, the prospect, and the closer, positioning themselves as like the executive. So this will also heavily increase the show up rate as well. Okay. So just briefly touching up on that, and all of this is also being tracked on Go High Level as well. All right, so making sure a dialed in sales team is very essential. If you have a setter that doesn't know what they're doing, then you will ultimately not get even 10k or even 15 or even 50 or even 100k per month. It will make your life a lot harder. Okay, if for some reason that your sales team, right, they're not filling out end of day forms, they're not qualifying individuals properly, then you really have to reevaluate, okay? Because they are paramount to the success of the company. And if they're not even taking out 1 minute of their time to fill out their end of day form, because in the sales industry, guys, like you have to be very quick in terms of hiring very slow, but firing very fast as well. Only have hungry setters in place. However, for the closers, only have very skillful closers that have skin in the game as well. Okay, so that's it, guys. In terms of the main components, that these are the main things that I would ultimately look at: what niche, what offer, what funnel, the traffic and acquisition, the back end, and sales. Once you know this, then you can really dictate how you can really scale to that 50 to 100k per month. And almost most of the time, it's mainly just data, right? It's like either content or it's data that you're not tracking. Because if you're not posting the right content, then you don't ultimately know that you're ultimately hitting the right ICPs, right? For example, if you have an offer that teaches people how to play tennis, on the content you're more so showcasing like lifestyle and just showing how to play golf, then those are two different segments, right? It's not going to hit your ICPs. So you have to make sure that the content that you are posting, it revolves around them. Moving on to the price, the inflow, and the churn as well. Now, this is also very important in terms of how I will also be able to see how I can really help someone scale their business, right? So initially, I would also look at their price. How much are they charging? Okay. Are they charging low, mid, or a high ticket? Okay. And I would also look at their inflow. How much inbounds are they getting on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And their churn rate as well. How many people are leaving on a daily, weekly, and a monthly basis? So if their price is very low and they're getting a lot of inbound in, right, and there's a lot of sales being happening, then I would also look at the pricing section. Like maybe this can be increased, right? However, if the pricing is very high ticket, but there's hardly ever any inflow, then I will look at ways to kind of see, okay, maybe pricing might be an issue. Same as churn, right? If the fulfillment and the nurturing is not on point, then you will have a lot of churn, right? You'll have a lot of disputes, which will ultimately reduce your inflow, right? Because people talk. And if people talk and if you start having a bad reputation about your offer, then people are not ultimately going to want to learn from you. So you have to make sure that your price, your inflow, and churn, like these three things will ultimately help your specific coaching business scale. And this three things will ultimately help you make a better decision. And it's what I ultimately do with any coaching offers that I help scale. I ultimately ask them what's their price, what's their inflow, and what's their churn rate as well. And from there, I can really gather data again, and then I'll be able to see how I can really help them with the current bottlenecks that they're facing right now. Okay. So as an example, right, I could show you guys. So let's call him Jim, right? He was basically selling a low ticket offer. Okay. And he had no systems in place, no sales team, no structure or sales process, broke leads, no data tracking, content targeting the wrong audience. Best month was 1K per month cash collected, no nurturing or fulfillment, doing everything himself, very high no-show rate. So overall, Jim was very frustrated, right? And he felt like giving up, right? As you can see, a little unsmiley face. And how I essentially helped Jim, okay, was I basically helped him restructure the offer, right? Market research, everything that I mentioned above. Okay. So we restructured his offer to low ticket, mid ticket, and high ticket, providing more value for his oncoming students ultimately. Okay. And this gives more value as well. And this way, the closers also have a way where they can price anchor and they can also downsell rather than just having one offer. Okay. So we implemented go high level tags, opportunities, automations, pipelines, just so everything is structured and is systemized as well, making the offer owner's life a lot easier and knowing where the main bottlenecks are, right? Off the back of go high level data. So then I helped him place one DM setter to handle the DMs, one closer to take sales calls rather than him taking sales calls, right? One dialer, and basically they had a structured SOPs in place as well, right? Everything structured, all the sales process in place, and actually the sales teams knowing what to do and just understanding the company's motive as well in terms of how to get a prospect from X to X with a smooth process in place. So they went through the SOPs heavily and they had weekly training calls in place just to make sure that they're as dialed in as possible, right? Communication channels, everything automated, application forms, calendar optimized via sales, pre-call notes, post-call notes, everything was in place. Overall, there's a smooth process in place. There's no leaks in the funnel, okay? And everyone knows what they're doing. Pre-call notes, right? Before the closer jumps on the call, they look at the pre-call notes that the appointment setter sends them. Post-call notes, right? This is ultimately after the closer takes the sales call, they put down post-call notes on the communication channel, and the setter can ultimately see if they need to follow up with that prospect or not going forward. Okay, so this ultimately helped the show-up rate going a lot higher. And a very good tip that I can suggest to increase the show-up rate is by the setter and the closer working like this, very hand in hand. Okay, so creating group chats is a very good way to increase show-up rate, because if the setter creates a group chat between the setter himself or herself, the prospect and the closer positioned as the executive, then it ultimately increases the chance. So rather than the closer reaching out to the prospect, it's actually the prospect reaching out to the closer. So what the setter does is the setter introduces the executive, right, and the prospect, and then the prospect obviously gets welcomed, and then they can have a conversation via the group chat, right? The closer can also get a feel for who he or she's going to be speaking with, and then they can jump on a call. Okay, so that ultimately increases the show up rate significantly. So we implemented a school community just so all the students that are going to be coming in, they are being nurtured, they get the relevant modules, they are in a private community where they can bounce ideas off each other, and it just keeps it very nice and neat and a friendly environment and a healthy competition within the community as well. Okay, so tracking go high level and spreadsheets. I think I spelled spreadsheets wrong here. So offer organized and structured, and now offer owner only focuses on income generating tasks. When you are the offer owner, you want to make sure that you're only focusing on tasks that is going to bring in more revenue, right? So that's not DM setting, that's not taking your own sales calls. That is ultimately focusing on content, right? That's going to bring in more leads into your pipeline while you have a sales team that does everything for you. So you can only focus on things that is ultimately going to bring in more revenue. Okay, as I wrote here, content. You have to have the right team in place, and all of this will ultimately lead to better student results. And if you have better student results, you can always post student testimonials on your stories. You're constantly providing free value to your audience via the story sequences, and from there, you'll have a higher chance of actually people inquiring for your specific offer. And from there, right, we essentially helped him to go to 50K, and we're on track to hit 100K per month with ads as well. I could just quickly show you in terms of the content that you need to be pushing out as well to really hit that 50 to 100K per month. You have to make sure that you're targeting the correct ICPs. Okay, so as you can see here, how do you create content that will attract your ICPs and allow you to sell to them, right? As I mentioned earlier, you don't make content for your ICPs. You make content for your dream followers, okay? Because in here, why should we make content for our dream follower instead of our ICPs? And the answer is, the total addressable market, the TAM. So this is your dream follower, right? And this is your ICP. So it's no point only targeting your ICPs because it's a small circle, right? However, if you target your dream follower, your total addressable market, you will have more of a chance attracting more ICPs within this dream follower. As an example, you can see here, right? You're targeting your dream follower, and this is your ICP. You will have more ICPs that are here as well, rather than if you only target your ICPs, you're only targeting to a smaller market. So you need to target to a larger audience. Okay, so as you can see here, you find your ICPs within your dream follower because your content will have more total addressable market, So the algorithm will push it more, and you'll attract people that you genuinely enjoy working with as well. Okay. So I hope that makes sense, guys. The moral of the story in here is just basically targeting your dream followers, right? That way you'll automatically hit more ICPs as well. For example, Shelby Shaps, right? She ultimately targets a lot of her dream followers, right? You don't see a lot of her posts only talking about sales, right? She shows the lavish lifestyle, she just does a lot of normal things, right? Also, TJR, right? He posts so many content on TikTok, Instagram. That's attracting the dream followers. That's more so of a top of funnel content. And from the back of that top of funnel content, that's where more people recognize who he is. And then off the back of that, now that the audience are in his ecosystem, and then once he starts posting a little bit of a middle of funnel content, and then the audience are like, oh, so this is what he does. Right? And then they get hooked onto that. And then they just go through that sales process again, right? Where they get funneled into the YouTube, long form content, they build more trust, and then they get led onto the VSL page, and then they book a call. Okay. So just touching up on the short form content as well. So short form content will ultimately generate you more views, but it doesn't generate you more sales. Okay. So the one thing that will ultimately help you to get to that 50 to 100 is focusing more on YouTube. If you don't have a YouTube channel, I would highly recommend you having a YouTube channel, because this will ultimately build trust and it will nurture your audience, and more sales will ultimately occur. Okay. So YouTube is very important in this day and age in 2026. If you are a offer owner, if you are a coach, or if you are someone that's doing 10K per month right now and you don't have a YouTube channel and you're not heavily focusing on that, then I would highly really focus on a YouTube channel. Okay, because that is one way to really build more of that trust and to really have more sales and more book calls in your calendar as well. Okay. So I hope that makes sense, guys. And this was just like a quick overview. And I would definitely do this if I was to scale a coaching offer to 50 to 100K per month. I would really look at the niche, the offer, the funnel, the traffic and acquisition, the back end, the sales, and so on and so on. Okay, so this is ultimately going to help you, scale to that 50 to 100K per month. So if you're a coach and you're currently stuck in that 5 to 20K per month and you want to scale to 50 to 100K per month with my help, then please do book a call. I've left the link in the description, and we can have a normal conversation and see how I can ultimately help you. But thank you for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Ciao.